Yep, I'm good.
Welcome back to the Fifth Bill Podcast. I'm your host, Eric.
And I'm co-host Scott.
And today we're going over chapters 16 through 20 of Death Lord Arcanist. Before we get into today's episode, I always like to remind everybody, if you could please like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Let us know we're doing a good job, along with having the links to the Capital Station Discord server and the Fifth Chronicles Wiki link down below. Along with, if you want to buy any of Shammy's books, I do have her webpage linked as well. And she is always willing to send out copies directly from herself. So if you don't want to go through Amazon or something else, you can get it from her directly most of the time, as long as she has it available. With that, we'll get into chapter 16, the Cult of Deimos. Dre is asleep, and he ends up realizing that he's asleep, and he actually has Swain change into the Soul Eater and wakes himself up, or the Soul Catcher, I'm sorry. I thought this was pretty dang impressive that he was able to know that he was asleep and that he was able to figure that out and then wake himself up from it.
He's getting pretty practiced with his dream magic.
He is. So kudos to, and he's learning to just be as fluid as possible with things and look at every single angle possible to how to figure out how to solve the problem. He wakes up and he realizes that there's two people in the room that he's laying in. He's laying on like a marble altar, and he's buck naked with a napkin, keeping himself decent. And
Average Wednesday, you know?
Right. Always wake up on an altar. With, at least he's not being they're trying to tear his heart out. We'll give him that.
No sacrificial offering.
Right. He does fall into the whole, what I would assume falls into the whole, virgin category, but, So there's two people in the room with him that are basically waiting for him to wake up. They are both wearing black under white, and they both have 7 stitches prominent on their clothes. I want to believe, I'm fairly certain this is because he is the 7th Death Lord. I know previously they did mention that he didn't decline to be the 5th one and then chose to be the 7th one, I believe. If I'm wrong, please let me know. I also don't know how on the first go around that I missed the fact that there is a member of the Ren family as a cultist, Jacinto, and I really wonder from which tree this apple fell from.
I'd like to believe it's Lyle's descendant.
Or somebody distantly related, but still has the Ren name, uncles, brothers, something crazy like that. We are not explicitly told, but believe that Rosella is a kappa Arcanist, and she has this longing look at Gray, who they think is actually Deimos. And she kind of goes to touch her Arcanist mark, and Gray's not familiar with it, but she's got that longing look in her eyes, and I wonder what she is. And then we also realize that Nini is still in the second abyss.
Chapter 17 is the home of Lord Oto. So Gray does request clothes. The clothes he gets, though, makes him look more like a ringmaster than a Death Lord Arcanist, but it's pretty soft, so he's got that going for him. At least he's comfy. They do have a bell from the second abyss that's supposed to navigate the labyrinth. So there's a little explanation that on the second abyss is a giant labyrinth, and this bell, which is a trinket or an artifact of some sort, can be used to actually navigate your way through and out of that layer of the abyss. Gray does realize that him being naked means that he does not have Vivi, and that's a really big disadvantage. So that becomes kind of the next goal, as to how can I find and gather Vivi. We do find out that Oto essentially has made his fortune from gathering star shards, gathering occult ore. So that's really where he's grown his power from. And similar to what you mentioned before, one of the cultists does ask if they can get the title of 7. So if we think back to the first book, there was a doppelganger arcanist who was named 7, who died. So apparently that title of 7, again, probably relating back to being Death Lord number 7, or the right-hand cultist of Death Lord number 7, comes with that title. But they get chastised a little bit for asking, don't be so forward, don't go asking for your promotion type of deal.
I like that Gray kind of starts playing up being Deimos and not just trying to figure out. He's has Deimos enough to understand his isms a little bit, so in chapter 18, Cult Mentality. We demand to go see where the rest of the people that he came with out of the pumpkins and where they are, and we need to find our mimic because we got to know where the mimic is. We find that Ashlyn and Ekrib are in a stasis type sleep again because of the soul catcher. Twain actually is awake himself because transformed into a soul catcher, woke himself up. Gray is starting to kind of get on thin ice when it comes to keeping his identity from the cultist, because he starts kind of saying things and small isms that are starting to kind of let them on that he probably is actually not the Death Lord. He does ask where Novak and Starling are, since they are not present, and they said that Novak is actually currently working with the cult now, and so Gray demands to go see Novak and Starling, and they are in this ornate room with all these mirrors, and the first look that we get of Starling is absolutely amazing. He is described as being the size of a draft horse. He's got like these super sharp hooves, really twisted looking horn coming out of his head. This is not the full Starling that we knew before we left the Abyssal Hells. Also kind of getting the feeling that he's got this like evil look to him. He's definitely not the timid. He's grown into himself, quote unquote, all overnight, and it's only been like a week since they've been from the Abyssal Hells. And Gray also mentions that Novak's mark is looking like droopy. I like to think of this as the painting, the persistence of memory, or like most people probably remember it as like the melting clocks, where there's a clock on a desk, it's like at a 90-degree fold, or yeah. So that's kind of like what I picture my headcanon when it comes to the Arcanist mark. It's got the like, maybe it had a stroke.
It's kind of just bent over, just twitching a little.
Novak did not want Gray to wake up yet, as he's still adjusting to his power, and he's being all snooty and important because he's now the Arcanist to an Eldritch creature. Shit.
Chapter 19 is Phobos. So as Novak is doing his training, he's destroying this room, but the room is magically enchanted, so these mirrors repair themselves. It's kind of cool, but also like it doesn't feel that hard to break a mirror, so like I don't really know what you're achieving. It doesn't feel like you're like breaking down a training dummy or something like that. We do finally see the kappa, so what we thought was a kappa arcanist is actually in fact a kappa arcanist, and of course there is a kappa arcanist because there always seems to be a kappa arcanist. Yes, gross.
Wait, we need to figure out how old some kid is at this point in time.
Yeah. Gray demands to go see Zahn. We do find out that Zahn is the lord of the magical items, so that's pretty much where he's made his claim to fame, which makes sense given the fact that he essentially is building this gate of crossing from the first book. With him, we do also find Vivi, but Zahn is not too happy and not really actually convinced that Gray should even be alive at this point, but luckily Deimos does have enough, I guess, sense. He's not injured or anything, and he is actually able to talk to Zahn through Gray. And one of the key things that he says is he actually calls Zahn by his real name, which is Phobos. This, I think, is funny because this is actually a throwback, because if you're familiar with mythology, Deimos and Phobos are the twin sons of Ares and Aphrodite, and they're actually also the two moons of Mars. So this twin pairing combination is actually a very common twin. It's a very famous twin that these people are named after.
I never made that connection. Like, wow, I learned something here. Dang, that's freaking awesome. Good
Yeah.
Shammy.
Yeah, I know. The canon dive into that is deep. Like, that is a deep hole to go down, but very cool little throw out that, like, from the initial beginning, Deimos and Zahn being twins and hiding Zahn's name for 4 books to drop this randomly. Oh, we're actually named after famous mythological twins.
Like, I guess Artemis and Ares would have been, or Artemis and Apollo would have been a little bit too much of a slap in the face.
Too straightforward. These ones are a little lesser known, so it doesn't come off so heavy-handed, but still very cool.
Absolutely. And that brings us into chapter 20, True Form Eldrin. We realize that there are vast amounts of magic that are being used to pull people from the weakest points in the hells to the land of the living. And this is basically how Zahn was able to get them into the living. And this is why they're going to go to the Spectre Sands or have Papa D go there, so that way they can try to go to one of those weak points again. But Papa D is hurting right now, and he definitely needs time to recover from all of the fighting that he's done. Zahn is very upfront about hating Gray because, I mean, in Zahn's point of view, I can understand why he dislikes Gray. Gray has stopped him at pretty much every turn for bringing his brother back. Because essentially, Gray wouldn't die.
Why won't you die?
That's where I stopped being understanding with Zahn. But you know what? It is what it is. Damn you, Gray, not dying. So Twain and Twice are just fighting each other, and they're just fighting like cats would fight. And honestly, this would have been absolutely adorable to watch, watching a pink cat and an orange cat fighting against each other, knowing, especially because Twice is probably just like going through the motions of playing, like acting like he's getting into something and then getting out of it and messing around with Twain, just toying with him. And then we find out that only Death Lords can hold Abyssal Coral, but Gray still can, so he goes and takes Vivi back. Zahn has this like freak out moment because he's like, oh shit, how are you able to touch the Abyssal Coral? And like, we have a piece of Deimos in him, so obviously he can. And again, and I think this is where the mention of the Abyssal Dragons, or the Typhoon Dragons, are able to, if they are able to consume Abyssal Coral, that they will be able to achieve their true form. So let's keep Ekrib away from Vivi. No, we don't want this badass weapon being destroyed.
Maybe little bite?
I wonder, do you think that Vivi would regrow a little bit?
Maybe. I don't know. Other
like,
things regrow.
How much Abyssal Coral do they need to eat? Like, is it just like a mouthful? Just like a crumb?
Like a little gumdrop of Abyssal Coral.
Right. So that's my question. I'll leave it there. And as we are heading out of Zahn's office, because he's like, leave me the hell alone, I need to figure out, again, how to get him out of the Abyssal Hells. As we were leaving the office, we run into none other than Raza. And that's where chapter 20 ends. Because Shammy knows how to leave it on a cliffhanger.
Particularly on the 5 chapters, you know?
Right. Like, I'm not saying that she intentionally did this for us, but, I mean...
It feels like it might have been, you know?
Right. There might have been a thought in the back of her mind, like, you know, every 5 chapters are going to leave a cliffhanger, so that way if somebody ever makes a podcast out of this...
I'm just...
Boom.
My delusions of grandeur kicked off. Like, we were doing this podcast before she started writing this book, so, you know.
You are right. This is... Because it was just the first 2 books that were out at this point when we started it. So, dang.
Yeah. Wild. That's wild, too.
Shoot.
I was more guessing at that timeline. I was like, it had to have been.
No, you're not wrong, because I remember getting done with the book series, looking at this one, and I was like, I need to take a break. And then I listened to the first 2, restarted the book series, got to, I think, the second book, and I'm like, you know what? I think I want to like do a podcast on this. And then restarted it off first. Yeah, legitimately. From here at this point. But with that ends this episode for today. Next week we'll be going over chapters 21 through 25 of Death Lord Arcanist. And with that, Scott, did you have anything else you'd like to add today?
Let's get into Raza's nice little secret life of Raza lives, you know?
Let's find out what Raza is doing here. All right, with that, we'll catch you all next week.